Friends, good evening. My name is Jay Vishwadeva. I run an organization called Sama Arts Network. This particular program is part of the festival Women in Music, Women in Poetry. And tonight we have two very fine persons, Dr. Shanta Acharya and Mimi Khalvati. Welcome. So the first part of the program, Shanta will introduce her work, and Mimi is going to be taken lead by Shanta. Thank you.
And for all of you actually for being here in these rather difficult times. I don't know, I hope this sounds okay to you. Huh? It's not sounding okay to me. Well, it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Mimi Khalvati, though she needs no introduction. But some of you may not have heard of her, not in the field of poetry. There are people who are outside the field of poetry here. So for them, I will say a few words about Mimi. She has published 8 collections of poetry with Carcanet Press, including her latest, The Weather Wheel, which was a Poetry Book Society recommendation. Her previous publication, Child, New and Selected Poems, 1991 to 2011, was a Poetry Book Society special commendation. And The Meanest Flower was shortlisted for the 2007 T.S. Eliot Prize. Mimi is the founder of the Poetry School, where she teaches. Her awards include a Chambi Award from the Society of Authors and a major Arts Council Writers Award. She is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and of the English Society. She has judged innumerable poetry competitions and recently served on the jury for the Michael Ondaatje Award. I now invite Mimi to take the podium, and I've also requested her to read a couple of her own poems. She's such a fine poet. I think she's one of our among the best living poets. I admire her work enormously. I couldn't resist not asking her to read some of her poems. Mimi.
Thank you, Shanta, very much. It's very sweet of you to give me a sort of like a proper introduction, because actually my role here this evening is to introduce Shanta. And it's a great privilege and pleasure to do so. So I won't be giving a reading, I will read one for you. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be celebrating Shanta's launch of her timely and wonderfully varied selected and new poems titled Imagine, published by HarperCollins in India. Shanta is a very dear friend of mine, and our writing lives have in some ways run parallel since first we met. I was trying to remember when that was, but actually my memory is absolutely terrible. So suffice to say, I think it must have been in the late 80s, when we lived very near each other, round the corner from the police station in Highgate. What I do remember are occasions when Shanta invited me to these sumptuous dinners at her flat. So before I praise her poetry, I would like to praise her cooking. Sumptuous, as I say, beautifully presented, surrounded by the gorgeous decor of her flat, generous beyond belief, the flavours strong but subtle, And these are many of the ingredients in her own poems. Shanta has many strings to her bow. She's worked in the world of finance, served on many boards, has impressive academic credentials, and she has written and published on the international stage essays, reviews, literary criticism, and 10 books triangulating between poetry, fiction, and books on asset management, which is a claim very few poets, I imagine, can make. Her novel, A World Elsewhere, was published in 2015. It's a vivid evocation of life in India in the 60s and 70s, and I found it absolutely astonishing. Sometimes in its violent and traumatic subject matter, in the delightful recreation of early childhood, and its mixture of lyricism and drama. I loved it and I recommend it to you. Having many strings to her bow is an apt metaphor, because although Shanta is a peace-loving person, I also see her as a warrior poet. She's fearless in her engagement with politics, fearless in her direct confrontation with the most difficult questions a writer can pose, ethically, spiritually, philosophically, fearless in facing our private desolations, and passionately engaged with both the private and public worlds she lives in. At times like these, and after the terrible events on Saturday night, I think it's fitting that we should be celebrating such a poet tonight. So thank you all so much for coming to the launch of Imagine. This book draws on 5 collections of poetry with a substantial section of new poems. Carol Satyamurthy, a wonderful poet in her own right, who's in the audience tonight, I know she doesn't mind if I read you what she has written, as she captures the book absolutely perfectly. So this is talking about Imagine. Shanta Acharya has deep roots in 2 cultures, her country of birth and her country of adoption. Both are represented in this rich and varied collection of poetry drawing from her previous collections. Her poems are a vivid and thoughtful way of exploring and reflecting on the world, on nature, on the world of art, and on the ironies of the human predicament. They also convey a deep spiritual interest, sometimes as a way of interrogating personal relationships and reflecting on loss and longing. Shanta is interested in often neglected corners of experience. She's not afraid of writing about horror, nor does she shirk from revealing vulnerability. But she's good at humour too, at seeing the ridiculous side of things, revealing a capacity for playfulness. In language that is accurate, spontaneous, and often witty, she explores ways in which the modern individual can find a place in the world, having floated free of traditional supports. These are brave and thoughtful poems, and indeed they are, so many congratulations. So here comes my task. At Shanta's insistence, I'll read you one of my own poems. Well, I think we belong to a community of poets in London. And for those of us like Shanta and myself, whose families are far away, this community offers us a kind of surrogate family to which we can belong and share in its triumphs, its irritations, to argue with, to embrace. And this is a sonnet that takes place in the community where I now live, in Stoke Newington. The Brag. I am known by sight in the neighbourhood to shopkeepers, baristas, cab drivers. There I go, there I come, in likelihood alone, up and down the road in all weathers. I am on smiling terms with hosts of people. There she blows with her silver hair, they grin, staking out a bean row, clearing a table. Road sweepers chat, guards greet me at the station. Some call me lady, auntie, mammy. Ask me how I'm doing, endorse me with endearments, watch my footing for me, rescue my bag. Caregivers all. No wonder if I brag a little, graced with such acknowledgements and such a large, extended family. Thank you very much. And Shanta very generously and sweetly also invited me to read one of her own poems, though it would sound much better in her own voice. But I'll read a short one that I really love. And I think despite its brevity, it really encompasses the spirit of her work, its dualities, its sudden insights, and of course it displays her own unique brand of charm. It's called The Fly and the Bee. I am equally at ease with the sacred or the profane. I can sit indifferently on sacramental offerings or on things most foul to beings, at home in both, bearing the good with the evil, hankering for neither. I have that rare option, the fly boasted to the bee with some exaggeration. I can only sit on blossoms ready for pollination, sucking the nectar of flowers, or in my honeycomb, dreaming of perfumed stalks, lamented the bee, acknowledging its limitations with graceful candour. And of course it will be much better to hear her poetry in her own voice. So at this point, will you join me in giving a very warm welcome to Shanta Acharya.
Thank you, Mimi. I seem to recall that I read your first book, Inviting, in 1991, and I was so blown away with her poems that I wrote to her, and she kindly invited me for tea, and that's how it began. And she may not realize that how important that meeting was for me, because until that time, my journey had been sort of complicated in this country, because thankfully, before I left India, so I began writing poetry in the 1970s. And poets like Nissim Ezekiel, Kamala Das, Jayanta Mahapatra, they had all published me in the journals they edited. And since they were not my family or friends, they had actually instilled a certain amount of sort of confidence in my work. So when I arrived, so they sort of prepared me for the pitfalls that I would face when I arrived in Oxford with great expectations in 1979, because as you know, every young poet dreams that you'd be published here. It's still a mystery to me why people like John Bailey, Richard Ellman, they really liked my work. But when I sent out my work, I never got any sort of positive feedback. One editor asked me, but do you write like Geoffrey Hill? I mean, I had not even heard of Geoffrey Hill, fresh from India, let alone write like him. And I respect his work, but I thought, why should I write like anybody really? So through all the 1980s, I actually did not send out it. Oh, something similar happened in America when I went to Harvard. Seamus Heaney was there as a visiting professor of poetry, and he was not that famous and well known as he became. So he actually was kind enough to go through my manuscript, liked a lot of the poems, and pointed out where I could improve things and all that. And yet, again, the same thing happened there. But the Indian journals, and there were two journals, there's one in America devoted to South Asian writing, one in Canada. They kept on sort of publishing me, and one of them even wrote to me that don't worry about those British journals, if they don't publish you. So I sort of stopped sending out my work, except to journals in India and those two in America and Canada. Then in 1991, when I wrote to Mimi and I met her, she then said, no, you should, the world has changed a bit, you should try. So that's how I sent out my poems again in 1992, Acumen. You're going to join
Sorry, we agreed I should sit in the audience, but I forgot.
because it's sort of, no, I think it's easier for her to sort of, instead of, anyway, so that's interesting about Mimi, is that it was a very hard time because there were no teaching jobs either. You may not realize now, even young people just can't even understand why. I have friends here who, they're either on the dole or, if you did English, history, philosophy, you could forget it. There were no jobs. So basically, everybody was unemployed, or on the dole, even in America. But because I was an overseas student, that was not an option for me, and that's how I actually went into the city. And thank goodness for the city, they were open-minded enough to actually give me a job in the Morgan Stanley of all people. So I was in this bizarre situation that, you can say that people in self-exile, it's a form of protest against your homeland, because you didn't return home. And at that point, I felt I couldn't return home. So then you live in a country that doesn't actually support your most important work, your writing. I can't even describe the whole feeling. It's like being in jail. It's like getting a death sentence. You're sitting in jail, but going on hunger strike as a matter of protest because you are unable to actually send your work out to the journals here. But anyway, that is the past, and it is not every day that one has a new and set of poems published. So my thanks to HarperCollins India, and especially to Shantanu Roy Chaudhary, who was the editor. It took a long time, because I think it took about a year to say yes, and another year for the whole thing, and another year, so but that's poetry for you. So my thanks to not just them, but all the editors, all the poets, organizers of poetry readings, reviewers, critics, readers, anybody who has supported me in my poetry. And many have contributed one way or the other to my life as a poet or to my life as a person, and they're both so linked that it's difficult to sort of tear them apart. And I've tried to acknowledge many in my book, and I must have been forgotten a few. But as I keep saying, it's better late than never to be gifted with such a book. I also would like to mention about the cover, because it's a photo taken by my youngest brother, Sanjay Acharya, and his photos adorn the cover of at least 4 of my books and my CD. And this photo was taken in a place called the Satkosia Gorge in Orissa, which houses one of India's famous wildlife sanctuaries, and it is sort of situated on a hilltop in a place called Labangi. I've been lucky enough to have my parents present at 2 of my previous book launches at the Nehru Center. I wish they were here, but my father died in 2001, and my mother at 81 is unfortunately a bit too frail to travel. I spoke to her today, so this book is dedicated to them. My 2 younger brothers in India are busy with their jobs and families, and India is about boiling at 44 degrees or something now, so it is really not a pleasant experience there. And that's why I'm delighted to have my older brother, Vikash, who is here representing the whole family. In fact, when I arrived here, one of the staff at the Nehru Center asked me, "Is Dr. Sahib coming?" At first I got a bit confused who he was referring to, then I realized it was my brother. My special thanks to all of you for actually being here, because a few of my friends did not come today because they were sort of a bit put off by the attacks in London recently over the weekend, which is a shame, but life must go on, and I'm sure good things will continue to happen. So that is why your presence matters a lot to me, more than you might know, because the other reason is writers are actually very lonely people, and those of you who are writers here will know that. What is even more important is being single and without a partner or children. Someone like me is even lonelier. so to have your support and endorsement is actually far more important to me than you might realize. So while my books are my legacy, like your children, you can't help worrying about them. So you wish them not farewell, but fare forward. So with that, I will read a few of my poems, and which will be followed by a brief Q&A, and then we will carry on the conversation downstairs, where books and drinks will be available. I had a lot of problems deciding what to read, because there's so many different strands to what I write about. So you don't want to depress people, you don't want to make laugh too much. So trying to keep a balance, I have no idea what I'll end up reading, but I thought I would just start with the first poem of this book, which is called Faith. And this appeared in my very first book, 1994, so I wrote it even earlier than that. Faith, F-A-I-T-H. There are things you need not know. My mother once said, when I pricked my balloon to discover what hid inside. There are things you need not know. My father once said, when I pricked my finger to see how I bled. There are things you will fail to find, both my parents said, when I flew from their nest to explore my brave new world. And how prescient they were. The next poem I thought I might read is My Good Luck Home. Because I seem to, I don't know if it's just me, but I sort of have a lot of bad luck. So people always give me good luck charms. As you can see, I'm already wearing two. In fact, I have all my fingers could be covered with. And I once actually wore about 4 of them in the tube, and I saw this guy looking at my fingers, and I thought, well, that will draw more bad luck, so I should probably not wear it. My Good Luck Home. You presented me with 2 scarabs, hieroglyphs etched on their lapis lazuli backs from the gift shop of the British Museum. It's for good luck, you said. I surveyed the pieces, their sacredness treasured in the hollow of my palm. Imagined them alive, pushing the setting sun along the sky, entreating my heart to be pure and light. They nestle behind a coral stone and a pearl, framed in rings of beaten gold on my fingers, charms given by my family to protect me from evil. I find the Egyptian scarab couple their own home, away from the crowded open house of my Indian gods, transforming each corner of my living room with gifts of fetishes from around the world. 2 Chinese cats guard my speculative angle of vision. Even Ganesha travels with me in my handbag to help me overcome obstacles in my adopted homeland. The 7 gods of luck from Japan smile on as you eye my marble turtle god with its fine chiseled look, its beady eyes, handcrafted, appraising your secret nook, leaving us with the legacy of an understanding, the knowledge of what it means to carry a whole household in oneself, to be so perfectly self-contained, poised at the center of all manner of creatures, unsheltered. The next poem is Shunya. Some of you may have heard this before, but I hope it's worth hearing it again. The reason I'm reading is that Shunya, the concept originated in India, and it travelled to Europe centuries later. I think it was almost 16th, 17th century by the time. And now it's a part of life, you know. When you look at a zero, you don't think of India. So, and I wonder if one day if I could become a zero. It took centuries, the journey from cipher, invisible wedge, a thing of no importance to zero, point of reckoning, piece of the unknown fathomed, being counted, standing solidly, three-dimensional, vanishing mystery, altering lives forever, establishing one's significance in space, time, trade, science, lending the world order, measuring phenomena, not just the freezing point of water, creating certainty, holding things together. Shunya, vessel taking the shape of whatever is poured into it, godlike, containing everything and nothing, pregnant with possibility, poised between positive, negative, life and death, vanishing point, knowing infinity, drawing down divinity, reflecting some of the universe, reflecting all to itself, always transforming. This poem, again, I wrote quite a few years ago. This is my third collection, which appeared in 1995. It's called What You Don't Know. And I'm myself quite sort of fascinated with all the things we don't know, because all the problems that happen in our world is because there are loads of things we don't know, whether it's some terrorist who is planning to attack you, London, or some financial shenanigans going on in the city. We had the financial crash, nobody had any idea how much debt there was in the system. Or in your own life, there are lots of things you really don't know. As a child, you instinctively know there are things you don't know. You also know you know of things the adults think you don't know. Growing up is a process of knowing you don't know, acknowledging that others might know, though they don't know that you don't know. Wisdom comes when you can forget what you know, when you know your parents, friends, lovers, well-wishers, even your enemies, your best teachers don't know. For what is worth knowing is what you don't know. Some people are born plain lucky, they sail through life without knowing they don't know. And not knowing they don't know what is worth knowing protects them from a lifetime of unknowing. For most of us, there is a price to be paid. Most of us get damaged, more or less in the process, and end up knowing what is not worth knowing. And this next poem is sort of carries on a little bit with that theme, actually, of people you meet or things that happen to you or don't. So and actually they have a profound influence on you. I call it Shringara because it refers to that Indian sort of concept of a woman, sort of particularly in Orissa you have this beautiful sculpture of a woman preparing to meet a lover. But it could be anybody, why should it be a woman? It could be a man preparing to do all sorts of it. When you wake up in the morning, you have to prepare. So this whole idea of being prepared for things, for life, takes me to Shakespeare's ripeness is all. And I find that concept rather interesting because most of the time we are actually unprepared for a whole load of things because we don't know what to prepare for. The image in the mirror is no longer frozen in an unimaginable longing. A participant in life's carnival, I prepare for illusion. Elizabeth Arden's flawless finish foundation frosts on skin breathing Shehnaz Hussein's sandalwood face cream. Givenchy's mascara thickens and lengthens eyelashes, rosewood powder blushes on cheeks. My mask is complete with Desire Red double colour, everlasting Estee Lauder lipstick. I spray myself generously with Nirvana and Samsara. I travel towards what end I cannot say. Along the way, those I meet and those I do not, all the things that happen to me and those that do not, keep defining me in some inexplicable way. Daily the mirror mocks my wrinkles, streaks of grey. If I am the result of unrepeatable circumstances, what use is there in seeking escape from self-enunciation? In the end, we are all dead. The days become my Shringara. The next poem is called Black Swans. Somebody once asked me that working in the city, what is the connection between poetry and the city? And as you said in What You Don't Know, is that at first it paid for my poetry. So I couldn't have carried on writing without paying my bills. But also, somebody, as I said, asked me what was the influence on your poetry, and I didn't think it influenced my poetry. I think on the other hand, it influenced my investing. And I think one of my... No, I'm not joking actually. I think, seriously, I was a good investor because poetry taught me. Well, I tried in my own way, though even these editors told me, but is this how you write, is this, to be precise in the way you write. And the other important thing is greed. I'm not saying all poets are not greedy, that is completely not true. Poets are like bankers, exactly like bankers. Human nature is the same, they just don't have money to play with. But it's an attitude of mind, is that, and that helped. That I never ever once thought how much bonus was I going to get out of this investment decision. And that gave me the objective to think. And this is what I apply to everything I do, and thus I create a lot of enemies all the time because I'm always thinking of what would be the right thing to do, not what would other people want to do, and then end up with a lot of problems. Anyway, so in his book, The Black Swan, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, he refers to an event with rarity, extreme impact, and retrospective predictability as a black swan. According to him, a small number of black swans explain almost everything in our world, from the success of ideas and religions to the dynamics of historical events to elements of our own personal lives. So here is Black Swan. See, he also said, the highly expected not happening is also a black swan. Look into your own history. Exiled from family, friends, country, betrayed by those you placed your faith in, always living at the margins, yet nothing, yes, nothing in your past pointed to the unfurling of the present. What has been, what might have been, two fractured landmasses drifting in time, acquiring individual perspectives, not parallel lines meeting in infinity. You wander down lanes of lives never lived, reconciling what might have been with reality. Is there free will, you ask as you sink, failing to swim against the tide, knowing only dead fish swim with the stream? Immense possibilities only appear to be evenly distributed. Not knowing the odds, we take risks, act against the gods. There is no way of knowing what we don't know, no way of protecting us against uncertainty. We build theories like terracotta armies, fallible guesses from fragmentary information, success or failure being always retrospective. Our limitations echo in memory, rearing up in dreams of the seemingly impossible. Our own lives, elegant black swans in full flight. Now, in light of these recent events, this is a poem I have actually never read in public. It's called Scream, and you'll understand why I haven't read it. The poem is inspired by 3 different experiences. In August 2012, I'd been to that Edward Munch's exhibition where they did not have the screen. And you know how it is, the painting that's not there, you then start reading about it. He had written that one evening I was walking along a road with the fjord and the town below on the one side. I was sick and tired, and that sort of caught my attention because I'm always tired. I stood for some time looking across the fjord. The sun was setting, the clouds were turning red like blood. I felt as if a scream was going through nature. I thought I heard a scream. I painted the picture, painted the clouds like real blood. The colours were screaming. At the same time, I was reading Rilke's poems, and actually very ably translated by Martin Crucifix, who happens to be here. And one of his lines says, Rilke's lines, "Who, if I cried out, would hear me among the ranks of the angels?" Then on Armistice Day, the same year, I was in my kitchen, facing the window overlooking Highgate Wood, admiring the sunset. When I switched on the radio, the news was all about war and death and killings and horror. So, things have not really changed, Then in a moment of epiphany, the whole history of human suffering, and if you just imagine right from day one, flashed in front of me. And then sort of an inaudible cry escaped my lips, if you so you felt that there are times you could scream, but, silently. So here is my scream. Walking down the hill in the mystic light of autumn, surrounded by nature's vast and ageless kingdom, enthralled to the city's sprawl, stretching to the skyline, I hear a sound, a voice primeval, half-human, a cry of compassion, a song of survival, music of the universe, mirror reflecting the soul. The sun was setting in an ocean of blood, the crimson horizon heaving. Clouds, birds, trees, all nature hummed in unison as a scream ran through creation, an orgasmic gasp, a howl of inexplicable origin, like silence before the beginning of consciousness. Time's scroll of suffering unfurled in a chorus of pain, rising to a stillness, centuries of prayers for justice. Darkness descended, the scream sighed, I am existence. The next one is Somewhere Something. We travel not to explore another country, but to return home fresh, bearing gifts. Our lives, the airports we fly from, our bodies and souls, maps and compasses. Days, the journeys we make, past the continents we leave behind. Surely there is somewhere something that justifies our coming and going. Isn't that why we seek a sign from each other of experiences worth dying for, as we commune with love under starlight, brittle with frost and the sharp taste of blood? Let's fly free, not nailed to a mast, see the universe with new eyes, not blinded by shadows that light casts. I'll sort of finish with a couple of poems. New in this new and selected. Because I have a whole new book of poems. And okay, let's try to read something. Hunger. This poem is called Hunger. I think needs no explanation. The gecko's progress across the ceiling, its scaly limbs defying gravity, eyes fixed on its prize, hypnotized, is matched by the speckled moth's nervous fluttering against the fluorescent bar light. I too watch, mesmerized, waiting for a taxi to take me to the Siddhivinayak temple. The wildlife program on TV hones in on a cheetah chasing a gazelle. The cheetah swiftly walks away with its kill. A neighbor's dog barks drunkenly as I walk past the entrance to a consumptive car. Dark, sunken, famished eyes peer at me behind the closed, tinted window screens. Each time the car slows at traffic lights, long enough for mother and child to gesture for arms, palms rising in salam. When I hand out 10 rupees, my car is mobbed with 100 hungry eyes. Across the road, a life-size poster sells dreams. An actor gazes enchanted into the eyes of his beloved, lips barely touching. In the temple, an emaciated devotee crawls across the tarmac, penitent for his sins, a caterpillar crossing from leaf to leaf, declaring eternal hunger for his love and mercy. I join the evening queue for darshan, my hands laden with flowers, earthen lamp offerings. It is divine hunger, this creation. I overhear a conversation about Darwin and evolution, dark matter, origin of the universe, religion, Einstein, Hadron Collider and the magician, the meaning of life, Higgs boson, in answer to the question, what is Maya, illusion? And I'll end my reading with a poem called Wall or Wings. A wall is an idea defining the limit of our perception. Our skin is a living wall, each cell pulsating with vision, tells us who we are. Invisible walls protect us. The Earth's atmosphere wraps it in a shawl of gases. It is not for nothing homes need walls, niches, arches, doors, windows for dreams, laughter, disappointments. Walls within walls are pilgrim souls, keeper of secrets. Walls revel in disguises, come in many shapes and sizes. Prefer to remain anonymous, take several aliases. Being a wall means perpetually adjusting your vision. Yet a wall is never beyond redemption. When a wall lies between you and your dreams, turn it into something else. Let it take wings. Thank you very much. It's really been great having you here. And, what can I say? The books and drinks are downstairs, but if you have any questions, we have about 10-15 minutes if you... Mimi, if you want to ask her anything also, she too will be happy to answer, but I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Christina.
I'd love you to say a bit more about how poetry helps you with your
I think I said what more or less said before, actually. It was the dispassionate. It's that mix of objectivity and involvement.
And why do you think the other fundamentalists didn't have the same extent?
Well, maybe because they were not poets, you know. Well, I genuinely believe that a lot of poets would make excellent, not just poets, you know, I mean, anybody with that mix of skills, you know, I mean, the most important thing is not to be greedy. That is truly the most important thing. But unfortunately, it's that kind of arrangement where only greedy people, well, I won't say only greedy people, that's unfair. I mean, some very good, you know, investment managers. But it does attract that kind of people. People want to make a lot of money, so they go there. People don't write poetry to make a lot of money, for example. That's just, they might write a novel, because they might get rich, but that too is quite risky. And it's just being very detailed about everything. You could say the same for anything you do. For a doctor, lawyer, I don't think you can afford to be scatterbrained. so I don't think those are special skills. I don't know if this answers your questions, but Hello, Sheila, yeah.
What inspired the walls?
Sorry?
What inspired the wall? I love that.
How did that come about, wall or wings? It's actually a Chinese proverb.
Right.
Well, actually, to be fair, it actually began as, because there are so many walls in our world, far too many. And I actually initially wrote a poem about